They called him the Weeknd. To the world, he was a superstar, the voice behind the lights, the man who turned heartbreak into anthems. But tonight, standing barefoot in his brand new mansion, he felt more like Abel Tesfaye, the kid from Toronto who used to dream in silence. The house was enormous, filled with designer furniture and framed platinum records. Yet one room stood untouched. No furniture, no decor, no soundproofing, just a large, empty space glowing faintly in the late afternoon light. He leaned against the doorframe, coffee cup in hand, and stared at it for a long time. His assistant had asked earlier, "Should we make this a studio too? Maybe a guest room?" He had just shaken his head. "No," he said quietly. "This one's for her." The words hung in the air like a melody he didn't want to finish. Abel stepped inside, his footsteps echoing softly against the wooden floor. The walls were bare, but they carried something invisible: memories, promises, echoes of laughter that only he could still hear. He closed his eyes and saw her, his mother, sitting in their old apartment, the smell of coffee and incense filling the air, her voice saying, "Music isn't your escape, Wayne. It's your way home." That was the first time he'd ever believed that music could save him. Now, years later, surrounded by everything he'd once thought he wanted, all he really missed was that tiny apartment, the sound of her humming while he wrote his first songs. He took a deep breath, placed his hand on the wall, and whispered, "This is your room, Mama. Always." And in the silence that followed, the mansion didn't feel so empty anymore. They called him the Weeknd. To the world, he was a superstar, the voice behind the lights, the man who turned heartbreak into anthems. But tonight, standing barefoot in his brand new mansion, he felt more like Abel Tesfaye, the kid from Toronto who used to dream in silence. The house was enormous, filled with designer furniture and framed platinum records. Yet one room stood untouched. No furniture, no decor, no soundproofing, just a large, empty space glowing faintly in the late afternoon light. He leaned against the doorframe, coffee cup in hand, and stared at it for a long time. His assistant had asked earlier, "Should we make this a studio too? Maybe a guest room?" He had just shaken his head. "No," he said quietly. "This one's for her." The words hung in the air like a melody he didn't want to finish. Abel stepped inside, his footsteps echoing softly against the wooden floor. The walls were bare, but they carried something invisible: memories, promises, echoes of laughter that only he could still hear. He closed his eyes and saw her, his mother, sitting in their old apartment, the smell of coffee and incense filling the air, her voice saying, "Music isn't your escape, Wayne. It's your way home." That was the first time he'd ever believed that music could save him. Now, years later, surrounded by everything he'd once thought he wanted, all he really missed was that tiny apartment, the sound of her humming while he wrote his first songs. He took a deep breath, placed his hand on the wall, and whispered, "This is your room, Mama. Always." And in the silence that followed, the mansion didn't feel so empty anymore. Long before the lights, before the Grammys, before the Weeknd was a name anyone knew, there was just Abel, a quiet kid from Scarborough, growing up in a small apartment where music was louder than the walls could handle. His mother, Samra, worked nights cleaning offices, sometimes double shifts. He used to wait up for her, half asleep on the couch with the TV buzzing in the background. When she came home, her hands smelled like disinfectant and coffee. Still, she always smiled, even when she was too tired to speak. On weekends, they'd go downtown together. She'd hold his hand tight as streetcars rattled by. Every time they passed a musician on a corner, Abel would stop and stare. Once, a man with a broken guitar played Hallelujah in the cold. Abel just listened, motionless. "Do you like it?" his mother asked. He nodded. "I want to do that. I want to make people stop." She smiled softly. "Then you will. But remember," she said, brushing the snow from his shoulder, "music isn't for running away. It's for finding your way back." Years later, he'd still remember that exact moment. The snow in the air, the sound of a cracked guitar, and his mother's voice saying that music was home. That was the day the Weeknd was born, though neither of them knew it yet. Abel was 16 when he wrote his first song. It wasn't good, not by the world's standards. The lyrics were messy, the mic was borrowed, the beat stolen from a YouTube loop. But it was his. The first time his thoughts, his fears, and his mother's sacrifices found their way into sound. He had set up a small studio in their tiny apartment, a laptop balanced on an ironing board, a cracked mic taped to a lampstand. He waited until his mother came home from her night shift before pressing record. The room smelled of detergent and fried onions. The walls were thin, trembling with the bass from the neighbor's TV. He hesitated before hitting play. "It's not finished," he said, rubbing his hands nervously. "Just listen, okay?" His mother sat down on the couch, her hair still damp from the cold outside. She didn't understand much English, but she listened, really listened. Abel's voice filled the small room, rough but honest. The song wasn't about love or fame. It was about the quiet, about missing someone who's still there but too tired to talk. When it ended, silence wrapped the room like a blanket. His mother blinked, then asked in Amharic, "That's about me, isn't it?" He looked away, pretending to fix something on the laptop. "Maybe," she smiled, not the proud, wide smile of a parent hearing their child succeed, but something softer. "I don't understand the words," she said, placing a hand on his shoulder, "but I feel them." Those words struck him harder than any review ever would. She felt them. That night, when she went to bed, Abel stayed awake. He recorded the song again, this time with the lights off. He didn't want perfection. He wanted truth. As the city outside drifted into silence, he sang quietly into the mic. "You worked all your life to give me dreams. I'll spend mine trying to make you rest." The file name he typed was simple, for Mom, but he never uploaded it anywhere. It stayed on that old laptop, between forgotten demos and unfinished beats. Years later, when the world would sing his songs in stadiums, he'd still think of that one, the only track that ever made his mother cry. The first time Abel performed live, there were 12 people in the crowd, maybe 13 if you counted the bartender. It was a basement club in Toronto, low ceiling, cheap beer, sticky floor. The mic stand leaned slightly to one side, and the stage lights buzzed like dying fireflies. He stood there in a borrowed hoodie, gripping the mic like it was the only thing keeping him from falling apart. The beat started, and for a few seconds, the world shrank to that dark room. He sang. Not perfectly. His voice cracked once or twice, and someone at the bar laughed. But he kept going. And when he finished, the room was mostly silent, except for one person clapping. His mother. She sat in the back corner, wearing her work uniform, a paper cup of tea in her hand. She had come straight from her shift, still smelling faintly of cleaning spray. But her eyes were bright. She clapped harder than anyone else, smiling like it was Madison Square Garden. Abel lowered the mic, embarrassed but grateful. He gave a small nod, a gesture that meant thank you. I see you. After the show, she hugged him and whispered, "It's okay if no one listens now. One day they'll hear you." Those words became his armor. Through the cold nights, the rejections, the long hours spent making music no one wanted to play, that voice stayed in his head. When his friends started dropping out, when rent came due, when he thought about quitting, he remembered that night. The tiny stage, the tired woman in the back of the room, the applause that wasn't loud, but real. He started performing more, small bars, open mics, any place with a working speaker. He'd leave each show with maybe $20 and a nod from the bartender. But every time, when he looked up at the crowd, she was there. Sometimes alone, sometimes with a plastic bag of snacks for him. Always clapping first, always the last to leave. He didn't know it then, but every melody he would ever write, every sad note, every quiet pause, would carry her rhythm. Because before the world applauded The Weeknd, his mother had already done it 1,000 times. Success came fast. Too fast. One day he was burning CDs in a basement, and the next, people were calling him The Weeknd. House of Balloons hit the internet like fire. Within months, he was on magazine covers, in private jets, surrounded by strangers who all said brother like it meant something. There were lights now. Blinding lights. Hotels that didn't feel real. Nights that blurred into mornings. Everywhere he went, people wanted a piece of him. A photo, a quote, a story. And somewhere in that noise, the quiet disappeared. He used to call his mother every night. Short calls, sometimes just, "You eat yet?" or "I'm fine, Mama." But then the days started blending. Studio, interviews, flights, more studio. He'd see her name on his phone and think, "I'll call her after soundcheck." Then soundcheck turned into after party. And after party turned into silence. She never complained. That wasn't her way. But sometimes she'd text him simple things. No guilt, just love. Are you resting? Don't forget your jacket. I made injera today. Your favorite. He'd see the messages hours later, type a reply, delete it, then promise himself he'd call tomorrow. Tomorrow didn't always come. In the middle of all the chaos, he started noticing something strange. The bigger the crowd got, the lonelier it felt. He'd finish a show, the stadium roaring his name, and step backstage into silence so deep it almost hurt. Once, after a concert in Paris, he looked at himself in the mirror, diamonds on his wrist, champagne in his hand, and barely recognized the reflection. He whispered to the empty room, "When did I stop sounding like me?" The answer was simple. It was when he stopped hearing her. That night, he scrolled through old texts until he found one she'd sent years ago. Music isn't your escape, it's your way home. He read it again and again until the words blurred. Then he closed his eyes, breathed in, and promised himself, "I'll go home soon." But he didn't know that soon would come in a way he wasn't ready for. It was 3:47 a.m. in Los Angeles when Abel's phone started ringing. He was half asleep, still wearing the same jacket from the studio. The room was dim, half-empty bottles, song notes scattered everywhere, the smell of burnt candle wax. He almost ignored the call. Then he saw the name. Auntie. Something inside him froze. His family never called at this hour. Never. He answered. Her voice was trembling. Abel, your mother. She collapsed at work. She's in the hospital. For a few seconds, he didn't say a word. He just sat there, the silence pressing against his chest. Then he whispered, I'm coming. No PR team. No entourage. No announcement. By sunrise, he was on a flight to Toronto, hoodie pulled low, eyes hidden behind dark glasses. The city looked different when he landed. Colder, smaller, quieter. He didn't go home first. He went straight to the hospital. The automatic doors opened, and the sterile smell of disinfectant hit him like a memory from childhood. He walked through the white corridors, his heart hammering with every step. Room 214. He hesitated before pushing the door open. She was there, frail, asleep, machines humming beside her. A thin oxygen line traced across her face. For a long moment, he couldn't move. The superstar vanished. He was just a son again. He sat beside her bed, held her hand gently, and whispered, Hey, Mama, it's me. I'm home. Her eyelids fluttered, and for a moment he saw that familiar smile. You look tired, she whispered weakly. You should rest. He laughed softly through the tears. You're supposed to be resting, not me. She squeezed his hand. You see, Abel, music doesn't take you away. It brings you back. The words hit him like a song he'd forgotten the lyrics to, simple, but true. He stayed there for hours, just watching her breathe, listening to the quiet rhythm of the machines. When she fell asleep again, he pulled a chair close, laid his head on the bed beside her, and whispered into the sheets. I never meant to forget where home was. Outside, Toronto snow began to fall, slow, gentle, forgiving. She recovered slowly, weeks of hospital food, whispered prayers, and nurses who learned his songs but pretended not to recognize him. When the doctors finally said, She's stable now, Abel exhaled like he'd been holding his breath for years. He wanted to stay longer, but she wouldn't let him. You have music to make, she said, sitting up in bed, her voice still weak but steady. Don't let me be your excuse. He smiled. You're not my excuse, Mama. You're the reason. She laughed, that same tired, beautiful laugh that used to echo through their old apartment. Then she said something that would stay with him forever. If you really want to make me proud, make the music that means something, not the kind that only sounds good. He nodded, and for the first time in months, he meant it. When he got back to Los Angeles, the studio felt different. The platinum plaques didn't shine the same way, the awards didn't matter as much. What mattered was the silence before the first note, the space where truth lived. He started rewriting songs, changing lyrics, slowing things down. His producers didn't understand. This isn't what people expect from The Weeknd, one of them said. Abel just smiled faintly. Then maybe they should finally meet Abel. Every show after that felt like more than a concert. He'd step on stage, the lights blinding, the crowd screaming. And before singing the first note, he'd always close his eyes and whisper. For her, he didn't tell anyone what it meant. But every night, when the bass hit and his voice filled the arena, there was something new in it, something raw, human, grateful. And even though she wasn't in the crowd, he imagined her there, sitting in the back row, tired from work, clapping first. When the show ended and the lights went down, he'd look up to the rafters and whisper softly, "Still home, Mama." Months later, Abel bought his first real home. Not an apartment, not a rental, but his own place. A mansion on a quiet hill in Los Angeles, hidden behind tall cypress trees and silver gates. The kind of house that looked like success. When he first walked in, the air smelled of new paint and expensive wood. Designers followed him from room to room, holding floor plans and asking endless questions. Studio here? Recording booth there? Maybe a home theater? He nodded absently, barely listening. His mind was somewhere else, back in Toronto, in that small kitchen where his mother used to hum while washing dishes. As they reached the last door at the end of the hallway, the designer asked, "And what should we do with this room? Guest suite? Maybe a library?" Abel stopped. The room was empty, sunlight streaming through wide windows, the walls pure white, untouched. He stepped inside, feeling the echo of his own footsteps. "No furniture," he said quietly. The designer blinked. "Sorry, no furniture. No lights, no carpet, nothing," he repeated, his tone calm but final. They exchanged confused looks. "But, Mr. Tesfaye, that would leave the room completely empty," he interrupted, nodding. "That's the point." When they left, he stood alone in the room. The silence felt alive. He imagined his mother standing there, smiling, maybe shaking her head, and saying something in Amharic he didn't quite understand. He whispered into the empty air, "This one's for you, Mama." Over the next weeks, the rest of the house filled up, chandeliers, gold accents, modern art. But that one room stayed untouched. No soundproofing, no wires, no furniture, just an old photo of his mother on the windowsill and a small candle beside it. Every time he walked past the door, he'd slow down, peek inside, and feel something shift in his chest, like the noise of the world dimmed for a second. It wasn't an empty room. It was home, distilled into silence. A space that reminded him where the music started and who it was always for. One evening, after a long studio session, a few friends came over. The house was glowing, quiet music playing, the city lights stretching endlessly below the hill. They wandered through the mansion, amazed. "Bro, this place is insane," one of them said. "Every room looks like a magazine cover." Abel just smiled and poured himself a drink. "It's just a house," he said softly. When they reached the end of the hallway, one of them pointed at the closed white door. "What's in there?" Abel hesitated for a second, then opened it. The room was the same as the day he'd moved in. Bare walls, sunlight spilling across the floor, the photo of his mother still resting by the window. His friends looked around, confused. "You didn't finish this one?" "No," he said quietly. "I did." They laughed, thinking he was joking. But then they noticed his expression, calm, serious, almost reverent. He stepped inside, leaned against the doorframe, and said, "This is her room. My mom's. She told me once that music isn't supposed to take you away. It's supposed to bring you home. So I left her space here to remind me where home is." No one spoke. The air in the room felt different, still, sacred. A soft wind came through the open window, flickering the candle's flame beside her photo. Abel walked to the window, looked out at the glowing city, and added quietly, "I promised her that no matter how far I go, I'd always keep a place for her." His voice cracked slightly, but he didn't look away. "She's the reason I ever had anything to sing about." The group stood in silence, unsure what to say. Eventually, one of them whispered, "That's beautiful, man." Abel smiled faintly. "It's not beautiful," he said. "It's necessary." He blew out the candle, closed the door, and turned to them with a small, tired grin. "Now you know why this house will never be completely full." And as they walked away, the empty room behind him glowed softly in the moonlight, quiet, warm, eternal. The tour ended in Tokyo, a sold-out arena, lights flashing like fire, thousands of people screaming his name. But when it was over, when the plane finally landed back in Los Angeles, Abel felt nothing but exhaustion. He'd given every note, every breath. Yet the applause, the fame, the noise, it all faded too quickly. He got home past midnight. The house was silent, untouched, like time had waited for him. He dropped his bag by the door, kicked off his shoes, and wandered down the hallway, half asleep. When he reached the white door, he stopped. His hand rested on the knob for a long moment before he pushed it open. The room was exactly the same. Empty, still, pale moonlight falling across the wooden floor. The photo of his mother stood by the window, dust on the frame, the small candle beside it half melted. He walked in slowly and sat down on the floor. No music, no phone, just silence. He leaned back against the wall and let the quiet wrap around him. It smelled faintly of wax and old wood. The house creaked softly, like it was breathing. Outside, the city buzzed below, distant and blurred. But here, it felt like the world had stopped. He looked at the photo, studying her eyes. Even in the picture, they carried warmth, that same mix of strength and peace that had raised him. "I made it, Mama," he whispered. "But I missed before I did." His voice cracked a little, but he didn't try to hide it. He laughed softly, shaking his head. "I get it now. Music wasn't supposed to save me. It was supposed to bring me back to you." He closed his eyes and just breathed. For the first time in months, maybe years, his heartbeat felt steady. The tension, the pressure, the noise, gone. After a while, he reached over, lit the candle again, and let it flicker gently beside the photo. Then, like he used to when he was a kid, he started humming under his breath. No lyrics, no rhythm, just sound. The kind his mother used to make while cooking. And in that moment, the mansion didn't feel empty. It felt alive, full of every memory, every laugh, every small, ordinary thing that had built him. He smiled, eyes still closed, and whispered, "I'm home, Mama." It was one of those nights when sleep wouldn't come. The city was quiet, the clock blinking 2:14 a.m., and the air outside heavy with fog. Abel sat alone in his home studio, lights off, laptop screen casting a soft blue glow on his face. He had everything. Microphones worth more than the apartment he grew up in, soundproof walls, racks of awards shining behind him. But tonight, none of that mattered. He wasn't the Weeknd. He was just Abel again, the boy from Toronto with too many thoughts and a mother who believed in all of them. He opened a new project file. Named it "For You, Mama." No producers, no team, no deadlines. Just him, the piano, and the faint hum of the house around him. He started playing a few slow chords, hesitant, raw, unpolished. Then, almost in a whisper, he began to sing. The lyrics came like breathing. About her long nights working while he slept. About the food she skipped so he could eat. About how he'd been chasing lights, when home was always in her voice. Every line carried the weight of everything he'd never said out loud. And by the time he reached the last verse, his voice broke completely. He didn't stop recording. He let the tears mix with the melody. "You gave me more than I could ever repay, so I'll sing your name in every sound I make." When the song ended, the room was silent, except for the soft buzz of the speakers. He didn't hit save right away. He just sat there, head in his hands, breathing. Then he whispered, barely audible, "No one needs to hear this but you." He closed the laptop, walked down the hall, and stepped quietly into the empty white room. The candle was still glowing. He set the laptop on the floor, pressed play, and let the song fill the silence. The voice that filled the room wasn't the Weeknd. It was a son saying thank you. He sat there until dawn, the candle flickering out just as the first light touched the window. And in that half-dark, half-light moment, Abel smiled. Because for the first time, he'd made music that truly brought him home. Years passed. The world changed, the stages grew bigger, and the Weeknd became a name the whole planet knew. His voice echoed through arenas, his songs hit billions of streams, his face covered billboards from New York to Tokyo. But through it all, the fame, the chaos, the endless spotlight, one sound remained untouched. A single song, hidden, never released. Every few months, when the noise became too loud, Abel would come home. Not to the mansion, to the room. Still empty, still quiet. The same candle, the same photo by the window, the same faint smell of wax and dust. He'd close the door behind him, sit cross-legged on the floor, and open the old laptop. The file was still there. "For you, Mama." He'd press play, and the room would come alive. His younger voice filled the air, trembling, sincere, every note soaked in love and guilt and gratitude. He'd forgotten how pure it sounded. Not perfect, not mixed, but real. The song began softly, his voice fragile over a simple piano line. "You gave me more than I could ever repay." He listened with his eyes closed, his head leaning back against the wall. The world outside faded. The tours, the cameras, the numbers, all gone. It was just her again. Her laugh, her smell, her voice saying, "Music is your way home." When the chorus hit, he felt his chest tighten. The line still cut straight through him. "I'll sing your name in every sound I make." Tears blurred his vision, but he didn't wipe them away. He let them fall. Because this wasn't grief anymore. It was peace. He thought about all the things she'd missed, the awards, the achievements, the headlines. But then he realized she hadn't missed anything. She was in all of it. Every lyric, every breath, every light that turned on when he stepped on stage. As the last note faded, he whispered to the empty room, "You're still here, Mama. You never left." The morning sun began to rise outside, gold lights spilling across the floorboards. He looked around the room, still bare, still quiet, and smiled. This was why he'd left it untouched. Because it wasn't just a room. It was her voice, her memory, her promise. He stood up slowly, closed the laptop, and whispered one last time, "Thank you for giving me the kind of love that echoes forever." Then he walked out, leaving the door half open so the light could fill the room. Down the hall, faintly, the music still played, that soft, trembling song of a boy who once sang for his mother. And though the world would never hear it, he knew she was still listening. Somewhere beyond the noise, beyond the fame, beyond the years. His mother was still his home.